The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." He replied, "What do you wish me to do for you?" They answered him, "Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left." Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We can." Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right or at my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John. They summoned them and said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life in a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord. The desire to be great seems to be a very central factor in human living. A careful reading of the world history will show that it is all about the struggle for power, influence, position, supremacy, and greatness. It is evident that from the First World War to the current uprising in Syria, the story is the same: the struggle to be and remain in power. Have you ever noticed why some people or tribes or nations attach the word great to their names? The likes of Alexander the Great, Great Britain, Great Roman Empire, the Great Wall of China. The simple answer is that they intend to create standards, an effort to establish inequality, the desire to create superiority as opposed to inferiority. This seems to run throughout the course of human existence. The desire to be great starts with us as little children, when we engage ourselves in little competitions to know who gets the first position. It could be a race, it could be a game, it could be singing or dancing. In fact, you can only reckon any of your playmates to be greater than you after a series of competitions. We grow with this disposition as we mature. It may not be surprising for us to discover that the two famous brothers, James and John, came to Jesus to make a request. They actually came to our Lord to lobby for positions at his right hand and at his left hand in his glory. The two brothers were ambitious, like most people in our contemporary society. They want to get into positions based on who knows who. The answer our Lord gave to the two brothers showed that there is a due process to greatness. In our technology-driven human society, computers and other devices give us shortcuts as options in almost every operating system. Consequently, most of us have linked the idea of shortcut to the other spheres of our life. Today, people want to get rich without working for it. People want to rise to great heights without the drudgery of climbing a ladder. People want to get into the promised land without passing through the desert. And people want to hear and want to wear the crown without carrying the cross. it's important that we all remember that there is no Easter without a Good Friday. Mahatma Gandhi summarized these dispositions in his 7 deadly sins of the modern world. Wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, science without humanity, knowledge without character, politics without principle, commerce without morality, and religion without sacrifice. It's good to be ambitious, but only if our ambition is on eternal values. Often we can only reach the place God has appointed for us through a series of disappointments. The first reading from the prophet Isaiah tells us that if it is with the will of God that his servant be bruised, experience grief and suffering as the due process that will lead to the salvation of all. If you examine the Bible, you will discover that God's appointment to positions of greatness would always follow some sort of due process. Abraham's rise to the status of father of a great nation took a due process spanning up to 25 years. Joseph's appointment to greatness came after a series of disappointments that started with his brothers. The promised land was realized after due process of 40 years in the desert. After being anointed king, David had to pass through a due process of fighting with Goliath and outdoing Saul before he can sit on the throne. To redeem us, our Lord Jesus had to follow the due process of passion and death. In our world, where most of the celebrities highlighted in the media seem motivated by self-esteem and self-interest and self-assertion, Jesus' call to total service seems unrealistic, and one might think unlikely to succeed. However, in our today's gospel, we learn the ideal dedication to the service of others as being fundamental to Christian discipleship. Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. And this example must always be the guiding light for his followers. This is why those who believe in him are challenged to give themselves, to give their talents and their time to the service of others without seeking reward or self-interest. It is the experience of all of us that we have had the experience of asking for something and not getting it. The experience begins in childhood when we begin to learn the difficult lesson that others do not automatically respond to our wants and our whims. In adolescence, we discover that our peers are not mirror images of ourselves and do not always have and respond to us in a way that we want them to. In adulthood, we learn the delicate art of compromise when what we want and what others want come into conflict with each other. We also discover that in our relationship with God, our prayers are not always answered, even when they focus not on ourselves, but on others and on their well-being. In today's gospel, James and John come before Jesus with a prayer of petition. They ask him, "Allow us to sit one at your right and the other at your left in your glory." The previous time that Mark mentions James and John is when they were on the Mount of Transfiguration with Peter and Jesus. There they had an experience of Jesus in his glory, flanked by Moses and Elijah. James and John understood this experience as an anticipation of what was to come. And in the future, they wanted the places occupied by Moses and Elijah. In response to the brothers' request, Jesus makes his own request of them. Can you drink the cup that I must drink? Or be baptized with baptism with which I must be baptized? Jesus is presented in the gospel as asking many questions. In our gospel today, one point to learn is that as Jesus asks us many questions, the only thing is to remain pondering on them and meditating on these questions. And so, just as Jesus asked the brothers James and John if they can drink from the cup, so he today asks each one of us, can you drink the cup that I must drink?